Hey, y'all, I got my cup right here full of sweet tea because I tested negative for COVID and I tested negative for the flu. I just got a bad sinus infection and I got the crud. So I'm trying to stave off the coughing fits while I try to make this. So hence the Alabama cup. Alabama. Rammer Jammer, Yellowhammer. I love my home. I love Alabama. The Yellowhammer State, the heart of Dixie, as frustrating as it can be sometimes. It, the things the state of Alabama is known for and the things we still continue to do can be depressing, discouraging, and disheartening, but it's still my home. I want people to see Alabama the way I see it. Yes, we have hard points in history, but we can grow from that and we can show the true meaning of Southern hospitality. And Southern hospitality is sort of an oxymoron. There's plenty of people I know that would help you with anything if called upon. But I also know that those same people look at people like me with my beliefs and think less of them and want them gone out of Alabama. They'll say, get out of my state. Go to one that's more suited to your socialist, commie, satanic world views. Well, for one, those aren't my views. And two, why I gotta leave? Alabama's my home too. Like I always knew the hatred for the other side was there just bubbling under the surface. But with the rise of social media and MAGA, it's flowed over to cover every facet of life with hypocritical, patriotic, volcanic ash. I've lost friends, longtime friends, like went on vacation together and was at each other's weddings because they had been sucked into the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories and Trumpism. They decided that I was the enemy, even though they knew for years that I was on the left. They had no problem in 2008 when we would go out and I would wear my Obama '08 t-shirt. But today they're convinced that I'm killing babies and indoctrinating kids to change their gender when I'm the same exact person that I have always been. I haven't changed one bit. They just took a hard right turn into what the fuckville. I've literally went to family reunions, had distant cousins come up to me, hugging me, talking about how, talking for a half hour, catching up, telling me they love me. And then literally the next day, see them post on Facebook how they can't wait for a civil war to start so they can take out as many Democrats as they can. Well, I mean, and I ain't gonna lie, that shit does kind of hurt. Obviously, it's painful to know that friends and family who supposedly love you would be happy to take you out. To know that they'd rather you not be alive or at least not in their state. Well, all I can say is, fuck them. This is my state too. I ain't going no motherfucking where. I refuse to give in because I want my home to be seen as an example of progress and how things can change when at one point they look so bleak. Will it happen? I don't know. Maybe not. I doubt it will happen anytime soon, but that doesn't mean I will quit fighting. It might not happen in my lifetime, but maybe in my grandchildren's lifetime. Someone has to start something for change to be made. Cooking in a crock pot takes forever, but if you don't put the ingredients in there and start the timer, dinner will never happen. And everyone loves a good roast or a good cracked chicken. And it's just so funny to me that these people tell me I'm a sheep and they're a free thinker. Like, bro, you're the one following the crowd. You're the one repeating the newest talking points. Almost sounds like you're saying, bah. I'm pretty sure a free thinker is the one who goes against the grain, who hears what all those around him are repeating and comes to a different conclusion. So just going by the normal definition of sheep and free thinker, you've got them ass backwards. As usual, none of your words word. They tell me that I'm indoctrinated when I've been like this my entire life. They just never noticed it until they were indoctrinated. And I think that's what pisses me off the most. Nobody cared until they were told to be scared that their so-called way of life was being threatened. And they were told we have to rally against the common enemy who just happens to be me, who hasn't changed, who's been like this as long as I can remember. Growing up, I spent a lot of time with my stepdad's mother. She took my sister and me to school each morning and picked us up afterwards. We stayed at her house till my mom got off work, during the summertime when mom was working. She wasn't blood related, but she influenced me just as much as my actual grandmothers. She had three things she enjoyed in life: antiques, Alabama football, and politics. Shit, that sounds kind of like me, don't it? I've been obsessed with politics as long as I can remember, and I can thank her for it. She was big into politics. She was a local Democratic activist. She was a poll worker up until the year before she died. in 2013. I remember going to rallies and town halls with her. Just about every get-together, her house, the conversation would always just turn into nothing but about politics. When I say don't call it a comeback, I've been here for years. I ain't bullshitting. I remember the first time arguing for a Democratic candidate was in 1992 when I was 9. Back then, people thought I was weird. Now we know that I'm on the spectrum. But at 9, I could recite every president in order and give a random fact about their presidency. When I was 11, my mom and stepdad built a new house. It was a nice house at the time, too. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, like 2,500 square feet, I think. And they let me and my sister pick out the motif for our bedrooms and bathrooms. And my bedroom was white with red, white, and blue border. The bathroom was red, white, and blue wallpaper. And the fan in my bedroom was white and with American flag themed. I also had this gigantic bed with, they had a headboard, it had backrests and lights to sit and read, and each side was a bookshelf, big bookshelf, like 6 foot tall each. And on one of the bookshelves, I just had normal age appropriate books, stuff I got the Scholastic book fair. But on the other one, I had nothing but political books, mostly biographies. Most of those were members about the Kennedys. Like I said, don't call it a comeback. I have been here for years. 40. I've been here for years. 40 of them to be exact. And I've watched my home that I love perpetually embarrass itself when it comes to the political sphere. Bottom or damn near bottom in every category. Passing archaic immigration or abortion laws. Refusing to expand Medicaid, but we claim to be pro-life. Just self-inflicted embarrassment time after time after time. Alabama is motherfucking beautiful. Mount Cheaha, the Gulf Coast, Bryant-Denny game days, which I'm an Alabama fan, I'm biased. If you're an Auburn fan, I know you'd say Jordan-Hare game days. The Cahaba River. I grew up right down the road from the Cahaba River, and if you've never been there to see the Cahaba lilies in bloom, I feel sorry for you because it is breathtaking. And I just wish we could stop shooting ourselves in the foot, making ourselves out to look constantly like fools. Proving the stereotype correct and make the state beautiful, not only on the outside, but on the inside too. Beautiful through and through. People ask me when I talk about my home, well, what can be done about it? They see I'm passionate about it. They ask, how can Democrats make inroads in the state? How can any type of change be started in Alabama? What the fuck is wrong with the Democratic Party here in the heart of Dixie? And most of all, they ask me, why don't I run? Why don't I campaign for some position? And to be honest, 100%, that ain't me. I wouldn't want to be in that position. I prefer being a teammate, a support system, or a critic. I'd rather do what I can to help the team. In high school football, I played offensive line, and I prefer that position way better than I would want to play quarterback. Maybe if things went different in my life, I'd be in a position to where I'd feel different. If I'd zigged instead of zagged or went a different route, but I can't change any of that. I'm comfortable in my position, and I would do whatever I can to help. But here's the thing. Even if I was in a position to be comfortable running for election, even if I was headstrong on being the one to bring change to Alabama, I still wouldn't be in a good position because I'm on the left in Alabama. And here, not only do you have to worry about conservatives and smear campaigns and the overall assault of asinine fight the woke warriors, the biggest hindrance, the main thing holding Democrats back in Alabama is the Alabama Democratic Party itself. The state Democratic Party in Alabama is in shambles. It is a joke that is in such disarray that I can't even joke about it. It's such a clusterfuck that sometimes I wonder if Republicans have just paid them off to make their lives a little bit easier. Or maybe all the Democrats are secretly Republicans who've infiltrated the party to sabotage on the inside. Either one of those would make more sense than the actual truth. That the Alabama Democratic Party leaders are more worried about being in and staying in control of the party than actually leading the party and fighting back against the Republican stronghold and getting out and making actual changes in the community to where the state would have a better chance of not being a Christian nationalist wet dream. Now, to be fair, I'm not saying I wish the Democrats would be able to completely take over all facets of the state government. I'm not too keen on supermajority rule no matter the party, because when there's zero opposition or pushback, then feedback doesn't mean a damn thing, and corruption and greed and power have the best chance to run rampant. We've seen it in the past when there was nothing but Democrats in control in the state, and today when it's nothing but Republicans. Side note, though, no matter the controlling party in Alabama, the state's always been controlled by conservatives. It explains why we've always been in the same exact position. I just wish the Alabama Democratic Party will focus more on its constituents and less, way less, than on internal power squabbles, because everybody is losing because of it. Thanks to the state party's ineptitude, Alabama Democrats are the political team every Republican wants to play for homecoming. Now, I want to talk about a man who has done great things in the past, who fought for what was right when it was needed and won that fight, who ascended to the top, but once there decided that he'd rather do whatever it took to stay there, even if it meant holding back the overall goal, who decided that anyone who wasn't not only with him, but bowed down to him meant that they were his enemies. Who, even though they were on the same side and supposedly fighting for these same things, for these same people, it meant those people were the exact same as the ones he fought back in the day. He's a man who has done great things for Alabama and the Alabama Democratic Party. But now is the reason the party is an afterthought and a joke in the state. I want to talk about Joe Reed. Joe Lewis Reed Sr., his full name, is a powerful man, a strong man, a man who achieved great things in Alabama. He was born in 1938 in Alabama, served in the Army. He attended Alabama State University in Montgomery where he was student body president, and he graduated in 1962. While he was still a student, after he joined the Montgomery County Courthouse lunch counter sit-in 1960, he was placed on probation before his eventual graduation in 1962. His participation in the sit-in is linked to the landmark federal court case, Dixon versus Alabama, which ruled that public institutions of higher education cannot discipline students without due process. By 1964, he had a master's degree and became executive secretary of the Alabama State Teachers Association. ASTA came into existence in 1882 at the dawn of Alabama's separate but equal era. It was the teachers' union for black teachers and administrators in Alabama. And Joe Reed is a black man. I guess I should have mentioned that, but I figured you'd know that. I figured you'd figure it out. In 1969, ASTA merged with the all-white Alabama Education Association, which was also created in 1882 for white teachers. Dr. Paul Hubbard headed AEA at the time of the merger, and Dr. Reed became the Associate Executive Secretary of AEA. The merger would lead to a much higher political profile for Joe Reed. In 1975, Joe Reed won a seat on the newly formed Montgomery City Council, becoming one of the first 4 African Americans office holders in Montgomery since Reconstruction. He held that seat for 24 years until he was defeated in 1999. Through the years, Reed employed the use of litigation and lawsuits to make changes. Sometimes they were generally needed, and sometimes they were frivolous. In 1967, he sued to try and block construction of Auburn University Montgomery, which was authorized by George Wallace during the whole segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever, to provide college-bound white students in Montgomery with an alternative to attending historically black ASU. Auburn University Montgomery was intended to serve as a lasting symbol of Alabama's massive resistance to the desegregation of the state's institutions of higher education. The lawsuit claimed that AUM will perpetuate a dual system of public higher education in Montgomery, and I agree. I mean, there were so many private schools that opened up during that time of desegregation, segregation academies, as they're known, that I'm not surprised higher education didn't do the same thing. But a federal court ruled in favor of AUM, and it was built anyway. Joe Reed has spent his entire career fighting the racist agenda of Alabama, and I respect the hell out of him for that. I'm not trying to take that away from him. In 1986, during one lawsuit, a federal court found as a judicial fact that Alabama had an unrelenting historical agenda spanning from the late 1800s to the 1980s to keep its black citizens economically, socially, and politically downtrodden from the cradle to the grave. Well, duh. Reed also led lawsuits to ban defective and racially biased teacher testing in Alabama, to desegregate all departments at Montgomery City Hall, as well as the officer ranks of the city's police department. He helped persuade President Jimmy Carter to appoint Alabama's first 2 black federal judges, and many various other noble causes. I'm not trying to take away any of the good he has done, but sometimes his lawsuits are just frivolous, like I said, and really help no one and end up hurting his credibility. Like with ASU, Joe Reed served as chairman of the Board of Trustees at Alabama State University from 1990 to 2008. The school even named the basketball arena it built in 1992 after him. But in 2008, there was some sort of kerfluffle. The board voted to terminate the school's president's contract and pay him his severance pay, which Joe Reed was absolutely against. And I kind of agree with him because I wish I could just be fired and still get paid. But I do know that's beside the point because I know that's just how it is with those kind of jobs. Well, Reed decided to sue the board he was on and the university to block the outgoing president from getting paid. Mind you, this was a severance package that was in his contract. In retaliation, the university stripped his name off the basketball arena and renamed it. The university said that Reed has completely and utterly destroyed any and all confidence in his commitment to positively represent the university and its legacy, and claimed Reed had generated negative publicity for the university in Montgomery and gone against board decisions by bringing multiple court actions. But here's where Joe Reed's actual power and influence come into the equation. He is the vice chair of Minority Affairs, and since 1979, the chair of the Alabama Democratic Conference, which is the black caucus of the Alabama Democratic Party. It gets confusing between caucus and committees. I'll be honest with you. I had to read and like, what the hell is this talking about? But if I'm understanding it right, a committee is a faction of the party that the party leaders assign you to. Like the leader's going to say, we're going to form a committee to lobby for Little Debbie Christmas tree cakes to be available year round. And then they will appoint members from the party, no matter their caucus, no matter who they align with. A caucus is a faction of the party that isn't appointed, but you can join the caucus if the caucus represents who you are. Like if there was a caucus for people who believe Little Debbie Christmas tree cake should be available year round, you could join that group if the group best represented you. But Joe Reed made no mistake about it, even though technically he's just the vice chair of Minority Affairs. He is the decision maker for the Alabama Democratic Party. He is the end-all, be-all. Everything goes through him, and if you go against him, you've made an enemy for life. Even though he technically isn't the head of the ADP, he is very much the head of the ADP. Kind of like Boardwalk Empire. You ever seen Boardwalk Empire? Nucky Thompson, well, technically was just the county treasurer, but he's actually the kingmaker. He puts into place who he wants and surrounds himself with cronies. Just like Joe Reed has done for years, like with Nancy Worley being the party chair of the ADP. Nancy Worley was an older, heavyset white lady who was the chair of the ADP for 10 years, maybe a little less. I'm not sure. Joe Reed said jump, Nancy said how high. But since Joe Reed is the vice chair of Minority Affairs, his power rests with the power of political appointments. He is tasked with making sure that the diversity of the SDEC, the State Democratic Executive Committee, that's who elects party leadership, matches the overall population of minorities voting in Alabama, which means that prior to each election, Reed was allowed to arbitrarily appoint dozens of at-large members, almost all of whom were black, to the SDEC in order to make sure the minority numbers were reflective of the state numbers. And as the old saying goes, you got to kiss the ring. And if you don't kiss Joe's ring, then you have no future with the ADP. Joe Reed would rather cripple his own party with infighting and non-representation than take a chance of losing even the slightest bit of power. I want to read an excerpt from an article by Kyle Whitmire of AL.com from 2015 detailing a meeting to appoint people to the SDEC. Inside, Democratic Party boss Joe Reed is giving the caucus its instructions and a yellow sheet with a list of names on it. Today, the party will vote on nominations to fill some of the 50 vacancies on the executive committee, most of which represent majority white legislative districts in the state, which the Democrats have lost to the Republicans. If a name isn't on the yellow sheet, they don't get the caucus support. With the rise of the GOP in Alabama, most white elected officials either fled to the Republican ranks or lost their seats to GOP challengers. But that's not to say there still aren't white Democrats in Alabama. There are many, and they've come to this meeting to try again to find a place on the executive committee. Of the black members of this executive committee, a handful doesn't join ranks with Reed's caucus. Among them is State Senator Vivian Davis Figures, who, after this exercise in futility is finished, asked Nancy Worley for a point of personal privilege. I'm embarrassed, I'm appalled, and I'm ashamed to call myself a member of the SDEC. What I've witnessed here today is a travesty. Figures is the only person willing to say out loud what everyone in the room knows. A block of members loyal to Reed have rejected many high-qualified nominees because they won't kiss the ring. If your name's not on Reed's yellow sheet, there's no place for you on the executive committee. The party, as it is constituted in the SDEC, would rather leave itself unrepresented in those districts than allow white members on the executive committee. Joe Reed would rather abandon parts of the state than allow that area to have representation if the person doesn't kiss the ring. Joe Reed's suffering from the same problem that ails many Republicans, to be honest with you, the boogeyman syndrome. But where Republicans see socialists or communists or what have you anywhere they look, even though none exist, Joe Reed sees Dixiecrats. And I will say, at least Joe had to actually deal with those racist Dixiecrats back in the day, unlike Republicans and their imaginary boogeymen. But the same way Republicans like to throw in your face that Democrats are for Jim Crow laws and the KKK and yada, 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 Joe Reed is perpetuating the same thing by seeing any white Democrat who doesn't bow down to him as a racist Dixiecrat. And I'm not trying to take away anything Joe Reed has had to fight against and overcome. He's done great things in the state, like I said. It's sad that it's come to him now being the nail in the coffin of the Alabama Democratic Party. And I know he will more than likely never hear this, but in the slight chance he does, I know that I'll be a Dixiecrat in his mind. Because that's all he sees if someone questions him or doesn't go along. He sees people trying to take his power. Rats, Dixiecrats. It don't matter who it is. He said former Senator Doug Jones was a Dixiecrat. Doug Jones. After Doug became senator, with absolutely zero support or help from the ADP, by the way, he sat down with Joe about being more involved in the party. Like, hey, we finally made inroads. I won barely, but we finally made inroads. Let's work together and try to build on this momentum, and bring people in and try to make a difference. And Joe Reed basically said, nah, bro. And then it got heated, and Doug said maybe the state party needs new leadership, which led to Doug Jones being labeled a Dixiecrat and compared to George Wallace. Republicans were saying Doug Jones was a socialist, and Joe Reed was saying Doug Jones was a Dixiecrat. It would be hilarious if it wasn't so pitiful and detrimental to the party in Alabama. This led to disgruntled members tired of a consistently failing Democratic Party in Alabama and a system for electing leadership that is ultimately controlled by one man to challenge Nancy Worley's party chair reelection in September of 2018. She barely won because of Joe Reed's hand-picked voters, but by that time, the National Party, the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, had gotten involved. The DNC ultimately invalidated her reelection, although it left her in charge until new elections could be held for a number of reasons, including the state party's bylaws, which define minority members only as black, was outdated and didn't align with the DNC's current bylaws. The National Party told Worley and her leadership team to correct the bylaws by inserting language that placed equal emphasis on several other minority categories, creating caucuses for LGBTQ individuals, youth, Asians, Hispanics, and several others. And here's why more representation is bad for Joe Reed. This is why the party moving forward and standing for inclusion is a slap in the face to Joe Reed. The new caucuses will mean lessening the power of Reed. Like I said earlier, in his position as Vice Chair of Minority Affairs, he's tasked with making sure the diversity of the SDEC voting members matches the overall population of minorities voting in Alabama, which meant that prior to each election, he was allowed to arbitrarily appoint dozens of at-large members, almost all of whom are black, to make sure that the minority numbers were reflective of the state numbers. Prior to Worley's reelection in 2018, he was allowed to appoint more than 30 members to the SDEC. You know, I've always had a theory about people leaving the Democrat Party. Might not be true, but this is what I've always felt like. The Democratic Party has always the Democrat Party has always been the one to stand for the ones with no voice, the little man. And when that meant only poor white people, it was a haven for all white people, racist or not. But then with civil rights and the ones with no voice, including people of color, the racists said, oh, hell no, and they started their exodus to the right. Same as when the ones with no voice started to include the LGBTQ community, the exodus kept on. And that's how you end up with people who would benefit from Democratic policies voting against their own interests. Same kind of scenario with Joe Reed. He fought admirably to be able to have a voice and for others like him to have one too. But when a voice is given to those not like him, he doesn't see it as a good thing. He doesn't see it as inclusion. He sees it as oppression towards him. He thinks others having a voice takes his away, and he will fight tooth and nail to make sure that doesn't happen, even if it means tearing down everything he built. So in 2019, the ADP held another meeting and elected new party leadership, State Representative Chris England. The new leadership also crafted and approved new bylaws that were in line with the DNC, with what the DNC instructed. But even that didn't come without any motherfucking drama. Woo. While Chris England and the new leadership were crafting bylaws, Nancy Worley across town was holding so-called ADP meetings with Joe Reed's loyalists and crafting their own bylaws, and surprised they did not go by what the DNC instructed. Worley says she was the real actual party chair and refused to step down. All this was happening at the same damn time, within a few weeks of each other. Two different factions of the Alabama Democratic Party claiming they were the legitimate leadership. The DNC and the courts eventually said Chris England's faction was the legitimate leadership, which must have sent a shiver up Joe Reed's spine. Chris England's black, by the way. I'm just wondering how that's going to be spun into a Dixie crap. Fast forward to 2022, Chris England decides not to run for re-election as party chair. So the new party chair is Randy Kelly, a Methodist pastor and a Joe Reed loyalist. He was the vice chair during the whole Nancy Worley two-faction debacle. I would like to point out that all this, what I'm just talking about, was going on during the midterm elections. And you wouldn't even have known there were Democrats running because backing from the state party was absolutely non-existent. There were more libertarians on the ballot during the midterms in Alabama than there were Democrats. Turns out when you're doing nothing but fighting amongst yourselves, you can't do what you're supposed to be doing, fighting for the people of Alabama. In this age of social media, the Alabama Democratic Party did not send out one single tweet during the entire midterm election. That silence speaks volumes. Flash forward to May 2023. There was a meeting of the SDEC. Joe Reed is out for revenge and ready to inflict his wrath. Members of some of the newly created caucuses showed up and were told they would not be allowed in because they hadn't registered or they hadn't paid a $50 fee, which many of them said they were never told of. Some tried to pay the fee right there and were told, too bad, so sad. A friend of mine was on one of the affected caucuses and was left out of the meeting. What happened during the chaotic meeting was truly the definition of a clusterfuck. What they voted on truly shows they do not care about the state of the party or the Democrat voters. Only power, the power of Joe Reed. A roll call vote was denied. The vote was claimed to be 63-49, even though video evidence shows that there appears not to even be that many people there to vote. And what did they vote on? To introduce new bylaws that did away with the old bylaws. Most importantly, to eliminate the youth caucus, to eliminate the LGBTQ caucus, and to eliminate the disabled caucus, while also diminishing the power of the other caucuses formed in 2019. Made to where they are committees where they can't choose their own representation. Their representation will be appointed, just like Joe Reed wanted. Randy Kelly and Joe Reed said that they had to eliminate the youth, LGBTQ, and disabled caucuses because it was just a plot to diminish and unfairly reduce the power of black voters. Call me crazy, call me ignorant, but last I checked, there are black youth. Last I checked, there are black members of the LGBTQ community. Last I checked, there are black disabled people. The existence of these caucuses didn't diminish the power of black voters at all, but it did diminish the power of Joe Reed. And that was absolutely unacceptable to the kingmaker. This fight over the eliminated caucuses is still ongoing, which means that at a time when one party rule hasn't done a thing and said constantly try to own the libs, they don't even have to try to do anything because the state Democrat Party does it for them. When the state ranks near the bottom of most categories, the ADP, the Alabama Democratic Party, is too concerned with internal power instead of concerned with the people they are supposed to be concerned about. Just a few days ago, just this week, earlier this week, I think Monday, I read an article about more Joe Reed drama concerning the Biden administration picking delegates from Alabama for the Democrat convention. To be honest, I'm still trying to learn about it, but it seems to me Joe Reed sent a list of 34 delegates to the administration, and they selected 19 out of that list, and it just infuriated Joe Reed. I have a theory, I can't prove it, but I have a theory that Joe Reed is mad because some of the ones that weren't selected were his most ardent supporters. I mean, like I said, I can't prove it, but that would explain why he's mad when I see nothing wrong with the selections. Minority representation at the convention is supposed to be 61%, and while 19 out of 34 is only 55%, there's another round of selections coming up where they should be able to make up that 6%. So to be honest, I don't know why Joe Reed is mad and threatening another lawsuit. Reed said he doesn't believe it's coming from Biden or Vice President Harris, but a rat. I got my own ideas, he said, but I don't know enough about it. But I smell a rat. Woo. Look, the GOP has held a supermajority in the state legislature for the past 12 years, but hasn't managed to pass a lottery or expand Medicaid. They just recently finally removed the sales tax for groceries. They claim the lottery is nothing more than a tax on poor people, yet it was only recently they got rid of sales tax on groceries. We were one of only a few states that still fully tax groceries, which is definitely a tax on poor people. Or when they need something, they'll always raise the sin tax on tobacco and alcohol, which is definitely a sin on poor people. While giving gigantic tax breaks to corporations to come here, and while we are thankful for the good jobs, maybe it's not truly caring about the little man when you're giving billion-dollar companies humongous tax breaks and you have to find the lost revenue in the pockets of the little man that you claim to care about. But they have spent plenty of time attempting to whitewash history, protect Confederate monuments, make it illegal to protest on state highways while celebrating Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous protest march on a state highway. Making it illegal to defund the police for some reason, while at the same time legalizing constitutional carry, which does away with gun permits, which defunds the police. Banning drag shows, making sure the elderly can't get any assistance voting, and passing one of the strictest abortion laws in the country with absolutely zero exceptions for rape or incest. And the Alabama House of Representatives actually passed legislation that will criminalize assisting someone with an absentee ballot. This, despite the fact there is no widespread at all voter fraud in the state of Alabama. They just want to discourage some people from voting, so they made the punishment of providing someone with an absentee ballot or helping someone with an absentee ballot, taking someone to drop off an absentee ballot. They made that a felony. The same as if they had committed a robbery, a rape, or a manslaughter. And what has the Democratic Party done to fight back against these obvious attempts of suppression and oppression? Not a damn thing. Because Joe Reed and Randy Kelly are too worried about staying in power than fighting against the GOP, keeping Alabama a laughingstock. In fact, the state Democrat Party does nothing but contribute to the laughingstock. Joe Reed does not care about the people of Alabama unless they bow down to Joe Reed, claiming everyone who doesn't go along with him is a racist Dixiecrat, diluting the voices of some people while eliminating the voices of others. because the only voice that matters to Joe Reed is Joe Reed's. Inclusion doesn't appear to be in the vocabulary of either Alabama political party.